Sycamore class, it's time for a new book, and I've chosen Quentin Blake's Amazing Animal Stories. And Quentin Blake is the person who's actually done the illustrations in this book, just like in our last book, Fantastic Mr. Fox. So he's not the author. The author is somebody called John Yeoman, but these two people have worked together on lots of different books. This is a collection of short stories. So let's read the first one. And the great thing is that the illustrations in this book are in colour. Okay. So the first one is called The Hippopotamus and the Tortoise. Here we go. There was a time when the hippopotamus was the most important animal on land. He had 7 of the plumpest lady hippopotami as his wives, and he swaggered around expecting everyone to treat him like a king. One day he announced that that evening he would be giving a banquet to which all the other animals were invited. Now everyone was very surprised to hear this, as the hippopotamus certainly wasn't known for his generosity. When the time came for the feast to begin, all the animals were shown to their places at a long table, while the hippopotamus sat at a grand table surrounded by his adoring wives. And there he is. In fact, I just realised that's the same picture as on the front of the book. The air was filled with the most mouth-watering smells, and everyone was getting very excited about the great treat in store. But before the meal was served, the hippopotamus banged on the table with his feet for silence and said in a very important-sounding voice, "My faithful subjects, welcome to my banquet, at which you will be served a grand array of delicious dishes, such as you have never even dreamt of. At least you will be, on one condition." And here he smiled, and one or two of his sillier wives giggled. "The condition is," he went on, "that before a single dish is served, someone here must tell me my name. If no one can tell me my name, I shall be obliged to send you all away supperless." The hippopotamus paused, looking very pleased with himself, and his wives giggled even louder. There was complete silence among the guests. A few of the braver animals suggested grand-sounding names, but the hippopotamus simply smiled smugly and shook his head. "If that's the best you can do," he said at last, "then I'm afraid I must ask you all to leave. You see, my wives and I are growing very hungry, and it is getting rather late. However, do come to next week's banquet at the same time." Sadly disappointed, the animals drifted off into the darkness. "He only did it to laugh at us," said the monkey, "and he'll do exactly the same next week. Since there's no chance of anyone finding out what his silly name is, I'm not going to bother coming to the next banquet." "Oh, you never know," said the tortoise. "I'd come all the same if I were you." Now, the tortoise knew that it was the custom for the hippopotamus and his wives to go down to the river every morning and every evening for a drink and a bathe. One morning, the tortoise crawled out under a broad leaf from where he could see the group making their way to the water. As soon as they were out of sight, he crawled onto the path and began to scoop out a deep hole with his strong front claws. He then covered the hole with twigs and leaves and crawled back into his hiding place again. There he is. Shortly after, the hippopotamus appeared, leading his 7 wives back home. Suddenly, the wife at the back of the group let out a squeal. "Oh, isn't it my Pudgy Wudgy? I've stepped into a hole and twisted my little ankle. Do please wait for me." And she limped off to catch up with the others. The tortoise smiled, pleased with his own cleverness. At the next banquet, the smells that filled the air were, if possible, even more mouth-watering than they had been before. But the animals all sat quietly in their places, knowing that they were sure to be sent away hungry. The sight of their dejected faces made the hippopotamus even more self-satisfied. There they are, all looking a little bit sad. "My loyal admirers," he said, "we have gone to enormous trouble to prepare an especially luxurious feast this evening, so I do hope you'll be able to stay to enjoy it." His wives shook with laughter at this, and so, not to waste time, for time is precious when one is hungry, I invite anyone to tell the assembled company my name. From the far end of the table came the small but distant voice of the tortoise. "I don't suppose it could be Isantim the Pudgy-Wudgy, could it?" he asked. The satisfied smile immediately disappeared from the hippopotamus's face and gave way to a look of pain and embarrassment. Realising at once that the tortoise had got it right, the other animals burst out into wild applause and even wilder laughter. A few of the less well-behaved ones even did cartwheels on the table. In the commotion, the hippopotamus slipped away with his snivelling wives into the darkness, leaving his guests to enjoy the banquet in their own way. And from that day to this, to cover his shame, the hippopotamus has always lived in the water, only daring to lead his wives up into the fields to feed under cover of night. There he is. And that's the end of that story. So next time we will be reading The Monkey Palace. See you then.